Greetings, this is Management 430, Human Resource Management, and we are talking about managing employee separations and retention, which is part of our employee relations module for competencies. So we're going to talk about how do we decide who we're going to retain and who we're going to get rid of. Obviously, turnover is an issue that has both a voluntary and an involuntary component to it. There are times when we have to let somebody go, and they, could be for lack of performance, could be because we're doing layoffs. There could be a whole host of reasons why that might be. And there's also reasons why people might leave that have nothing to do with the organization. They want to retire, they have a family move going elsewhere, they may decide that they don't want to work anymore, and there's really nothing the organization can do for those people who are leaving of their own volition. We obviously want to do everything we can to minimize the voluntary turnover, right? The people who are leaving because they want to, we would like to be able to retain them as best as we can, and we need to know the reasons why they leave. And obviously we need to intervene and do a better job with hiring and training people so that we aren't letting people go for poor performance. So these are the things that we'll think about as we get through this module. So voluntary turnover is turnover that the employee initiates, and there could be a whole host of reasons why that might be. It might be because they have better alternatives, they have family issues that they're dealing with, or they're unhappy with the organization. So we need to conduct what we call exit interviews, which gives us some insight into why people are leaving, so we can differentiate between what's voluntary and involuntary, and then obviously to know the why behind why people are leaving. Other aspects of voluntary turnover or voluntary departures, as we may also hear it called, is issues of tardiness and absenteeism. Tardiness is people who come in late. Absenteeism is people who miss work without notice, or miss work because they're sick and reasons. And obviously there's a whole host of reasons why people might be absent. They could be hurt, but really absenteeism is really about going above and beyond the days when people are just not coming in because they're sick or they have doctor's appointments and things like that. Absenteeism is people who just don't show up, or they say, oh, I can't make it into work today, and they're disengaged. So people who are tardy, people who are absent, often do so because they're disengaged with the organization. We will talk about engagement in a little bit. But turnover rates are calculated basically based on the number of departures per year divided by the number of average employees in the organization, and every organization has a unique turnover rate. And also note that the turnover rate is going to differ for different levels of positions in the company. We might have an overall turnover rate for the organization, but it might be higher for entry-level employees and very low for more senior employees or mid-level employees. So it's not enough to just have a turnover rate for the whole organization, but also you might want to have turnover rates for different categories or classifications of employees to know what you can expect for different positions. And you should track this over time. Well, we're going to talk about metrics in the next module on technology and data. And an important factor that we should be investigating is the why people are leaving, and we should be tracking these metrics over time so that we can create the story and understand the story behind why people are leaving. So always important. Now, retention rate is demonstrated as the number of employees who stayed in the organization divided by the number of employees at their start times, and at the start times 100. So how often do we retain them? When we, at a point in time, everybody who started, how many of them are still there, or how many quit within the year. So it's very similar to the turnover rate, but it's getting at it from a different perspective. It's looking at, how long they stay in the organization. We always want to manage our turnover, and try to minimize turnover. We'll never get rid of turnover. I think that's really important for you to understand, that you will never have zero turnover. And in fact, oftentimes we do want people to leave the organization because they are poor performers, or because a division or a department is underperforming, and a whole host of reasons, along those lines. But when we have voluntary turnover, when we have people leaving when they should not be, or leaving in a way that is directly related to how they are treated in the organization, or how well they get paid, or how well they are managed, turnover can cost us money. It can cost us real money. So a lot of organizations will say, oh, well, just let them go. Well, yes, you could do that, but there's a cost attached to that, because there's a cost attached to letting them go, and there may be legal issues that you have to address. Then there's the cost for advertising and rehiring somebody new. So that's all of the direct costs of what it costs to advertise, interview, hire new employees to replace them. Then there's the onboarding or orientation plan for how do we get them on board in the organization. And then lastly, the amount of time it takes them to get up to speed. Now that's kind of related to the onboarding, but ultimately it takes a good 6 months or more for somebody to be fully functional at their job. They're still learning new things for those first 6 months. And so some of the key metrics that we also look at is the 6-month retention rate. How many of our people stay 6 months or more? And so we do want to look specifically at how do we make sure we keep people beyond those initial kind of haphazard first 6 months where people are still learning things. And so people are not performing to the best of their ability, to full functionality, and that costs the company as well, because other people have to pick up the slack, or we may have to have overtime hours for other people. No matter what, there are direct costs to replace somebody, to hire new people, to onboard them and get them up to speed, and to train them. So there are new training costs involved. It's probably more beneficial for an organization to actually look at the reasons why people leave and do something to address that, rather than just saying throw up your hands and just let them go and I don't care, I don't have to treat them well or nicely in order to keep them on board in the organization. So there's also a loss of human capital. Remember, each person brings unique knowledge, skills, and abilities and experiences to the table, and that is the part of the human capital that is within that organization that we can use as a competitive advantage. And when we lose people that have institutional knowledge, that have functional knowledge that is really important for us, we lose that human capital, and then we need to replace it, which may take a while to build up that human capital. The social capital is also the interpersonal losses that happen when people leave, and the connections that people have, the network of support that people feel. So we lose social capital because people are leaving and those networks become disrupted. As I said, not all turnover is bad. We will never have zero turnover, and we don't want zero turnover, but we want it to be as low as functionally reasonable. So we need to be looking at why people are leaving and making sure that we're managing the things that we can directly have an impact on. I can't impact when somebody wants to retire. That's their choice. I can't impact if someone needs to move for family reasons, but I can impact somebody who says I'm not getting paid enough, or they're paying me better over here, or this, or my boss is really toxic and I don't want to work here in that department anymore. So these are things that we can focus on and we can try to address. As I said, people leave for a whole host of voluntary reasons. One could be they're just simply unhappy with the job, they don't like what they're doing anymore, or the job and the organization just don't meet their needs, they're bored, they want a new challenge. all those things. When there is a good labor market out there and there's lots of job opportunities, there's an ease of movement for people, and so people are more likely to leave when there are better opportunities out there. And so people will always be looking for that. So when we think about our strategic activities, one of the things that we should be looking at is what's going on in the market. How competitive are our wages? How competitive are our working conditions? Are we unionized or non-unionized? All of those factors can help us to understand if and when people may leave, and we may be able to better manage that in time. Obviously, there are a lot of things that can trigger turnover. For example, let's say there's an ethical dilemma in the organization. The organization has a problem, and they engage in some unethical behaviors, and someone might look at that and say, oh, I don't want to stay here working for a company that does those sorts of things. Or maybe there's a huge sexual harassment scandal or a discrimination scandal going on in the organization, or customers are suing them because the products are faulty. There could be a whole host of crises or issues or critical incidents that happen that trigger somebody to say, maybe there's something elsewhere where I can go. Job embeddedness is looking at why people stay. Why do people stay? We'll talk about engagement because this has a direct impact on job embeddedness, because when people feel engaged, when they are excited about the things that the organization does, they are far more likely to want to stay. So we need to investigate the reasons why someone wants to stay in the company and recognize that what they would lose if they left the company.